Do the progressives ever get sick of censoring us or kicking us while we're down or forcing us to comply with bullcrap laws that go against all of our beliefs? Hey rebels, it's time for Pirate Post's weekly news for nonconformists. And we're going to get into all that today, so stick around. Okay, getting right to the news. So Nancy Pelosi and the House of Representatives have finally passed Bill H.R. 5, the Equality Act. And I mean, that's a good thing, right? I mean, who doesn't want equality? But of course, as with all things progressive, this one is just another draconian, dystopian legislation that directly attacks people of faith, including those who have faith in real science, and anyone who wants the right to think the way they want, transact with who they want, and even associate with who they want. I mean, there is so much wrong with this bill, I'll probably need to do a segment focused exclusively on this thought crime enforcement law. And once I do, I'll link that in the comments below. Anyway, according to the summary on congress.gov, this bill prohibits discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity in a wide variety of areas, including public accommodations and facilities, education, federal funding, employment, housing, credit, and the jury system. Specifically, the bill defines and includes sex and sexual orientation and gender identity among the prohibited categories of discrimination or segregation. So essentially, it allows the Department of Justice to stick its nose into more of your actions, cultures, beliefs, if they have anything related to do with sexual orientation or gender identity. And as such, it affects everything that Americans do, think, or say, even in their own home, school, or workplace. Look, I fully agree that people should be allowed to love whoever they want, dress how they want, and call themselves anything that they want to. The problem is this feeling of discomfort or distress that occurs when people whose gender identity differs from the sex assigned at birth is a real condition called gender dysphoria. And even though 80 to 95% of children who experience this gender dysphoria start feeling okay with their bodies after they hit puberty, this bill forces doctors to provide surgeries to these children and to anyone who wants to change their sex, even though that doctor might not believe in that dangerous procedure. Catholic hospitals in California and New Jersey have already been sued by otherwise healthy women who just wanted hysterectomies because they wanted to become more male. And parents in Ohio have lost custody of their 17-year-old daughter because they refused to provide body-altering testosterone supplements. This draconian legislation also makes several religious cultures and rituals completely illegal. In a letter by the Coalition for Jewish Values written to Nancy Pelosi, they listed many observant Jewish practices and cultures which would be grounds for a discrimination complaint and underneath this new proposed legislation, including things like separate seating at weddings, single-gender dancing, and even special hours for swimming. These restrictions also hit Christians, Muslims, and members of other faiths by making perfectly safe and voluntary cultures and real rituals illegal. And in case you somehow missed it, this bill also makes it legal for men to hang out in the women's locker rooms and in their shower rooms, which causes all sorts of untold safety issues. And it kills the future of women's sports and sports scholarships by allowing men to compete in women's sports, a practice that is completely beyond asinine, since science proves that men and women are biologically different. Feminists of all shapes and stripes should be attacking this obviously dangerous, unfair, and anything but equal equality law. But of course, they're going to continue to follow their leftist elite rulers, marching orders right down to the bitter end, leaving those of us who actually believe in personal freedom holding the bag one more time. Speaking of authoritarians, now they're going after the cable and communication networks who dare to even carry news that doesn't fit their narrative. Two Democrats who are on the Energy and Commerce subcommittees on Communication and Technology, Representative Anna Eshoo and Jerry McNamee, both Democrats from California, of course, have written a letter to streaming services, cable networks, and to the satellite services demanding the answer to several specific questions. In their letter, they specifically call out Fox News, One American News Network, and Newsmax as being plagued by misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories, and lies. They also accuse them of fueling the Capitol riots with their incendiary reports of false information regarding the elections. In their letter, they accuse these right-wing news programs of giving false information about COVID, false information about the election, and much more to a group who, in their words, are much more susceptible to disinformation, lies, and half-truth than their woke, left-leaning sycophants. They even said that the information these networks were giving, the information that doesn't fit the Democrat Party line, would end up getting people killed. In their view, the fact that OAN, Fox, and Newsmax have let physicians who maybe disagree with Dr. Fauci on certain things on the air, or they're questioning why states with little regulations like Florida aren't doing any worse than the virtual prison camps like California are doing, are enough to condemn them as conspiracy theorists. And they say that any investigation of, very surprising election night results equates to something closer to treason. The funniest part about this whole letter is the proof of fake news cited in their letter comes from sources like Vox and USA Today and the Washington Post. So they're proving that right-wing networks are lying by quoting their obvious liberal rags. I mean, just listen to a few of the questions that they're asking. Do you require, through contracts or otherwise, the channels you carry to abide by content guidelines? If so, please provide a copy of those guidelines. How many of your subscribers tuned into Fox News, Newsmax, and OANN for the weeks leading up to the election? Have you ever taken action against a channel for using your platform to disseminate any disinformation? In other words, are you willing to sue any news source that favors right-wing news as opposed to progressive propaganda? And the last question, are you planning to continue carrying Fox, Newsmax, and OANN? Provides a strong push, essentially asking the networks to drop any news that doesn't toe the party line. Links to the document are in the description below. The fact is, anytime we have politicians dictating to not only the news media, but even going deeper after the communication networks that carry them, we're going to have a problem. People need to have the chance to see both sides of a story so they can make their own choices. Otherwise, we're going to slip into this world where we're being ruled by a totalitarian regime without the information we need to fight back. But I guess that's what they're counting on. And finally, speaking of politicians who have no business being up in our business, we again have progressives with no business sense reaching out to kick small business owners in the head while they're already down. Democrats on the House committee have now approved a $15 an hour minimum wage as part of the stimulus package. Committee member Ilhan Omar said in a tweet, "It's a wrap. 15, minimum wage passes the Education and Labor Committee after more than 13 hours of debate." The new law raises the federal minimum wage from $7.25 to $15 an hour. And of course, that raises the wage of everybody who's making more than that as well. Now, like many socialist-leaning laws, on the surface, this sounds like it could be a good thing. I mean, we really should be out there lifting everybody up wherever we can. Everybody can use more money, and it is tough to make a living on $7.25 an hour. But unfortunately, this over doubling of the minimum wage is also going to cost the U.S. nearly 1.4 million jobs. So while some people are going to make more money under this, 1.4 million people are going to be plunged into complete disparity. In fact, there are several problems with raising the minimum wage, especially when you do it by this much, over double. First of all, the prices on all goods and services are going to increase to cover the extra cost of labor. That means that while the people who are fortunate enough to get the raise instead of getting the axe really aren't going to be better off because of the higher prices. And as we said earlier, 1.4 million people are going to be let go. Next, the businesses that are already struggling with this COVID crisis aren't going to have the flexibility they need to run the labor force the way they want during this crisis. And in addition, small business owners are going to be hit disproportionately by this increase. Large companies, they have the ability to lower their costs by increasing the automation, and they can get rid of more personnel by doing that. The small business, on the other hand, they're going to be forced to pay this unsustainable salaries and eventually get forced out of business. Or they'll be driven to underground labor markets to forgo the regulations altogether. And personally, I think that's a great thing, but it does put them in a position where they're trying to avoid legal repercussions and not running their businesses legally. But perhaps the worst thing about this progressives proposing this bill is that they know it's going to shut down businesses already suffering from the COVID crisis and lead to millions more in unemployment. But they honestly couldn't give a shit. According to Democrat Ro Khanna, we don't want the small businesses that would be pushed under. And David Sirota backed it up by saying that if a business can't afford it, they're not a viable enterprise, which was then doubled down on by Helene Olin, who said if you can't afford vacation pay, you don't have a viable business model. But I say, given that small businesses are the backbone of the economy and they are already getting dragged through the mud during this COVID crisis, you'd really think their representatives would be a little bit less callous towards their needs. But I guess we can't expect that from the tolerant left, They are happy to step on anyone who gets in the way of their overall objectives. And one of those objectives always seems to be the complete dismantling of small businesses to the benefit of their 1% corporate elite overlords. Okay, so that wraps up your slice of freedom and liberty news for the week in this unfree world. Remember, peaceful resistance is not futile. Have a great week ahead. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you click on the link in the description and subscribe to Palm Tree Research right now so that every week you'll get the inside scoop on the latest infringements and wins in your fight for freedom and liberty. If you enjoyed this edition of the Pirate Post, please hit the like or share button. We really appreciate it.